Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel, Holistic Health Flow. Today, we'll be launching the first episode of a series of episodes under this channel. And we will be discussing a topic that actually has populated headlines for some time now. And it's important for you to know about its details to help you lead a healthier life. It's insulin resistance. Now, to keep it simple, insulin resistance is basically the inability of the pancreas to produce enough insulin to keep up with the level of sugar consumption that you're having. So no matter how much insulin it's producing, it's not able to keep up with the sugar intake that you're having. And that can develop over years, and that could be over 10 years and can start as early as when you're in your teenage years, depending on the type of food you're eating. So if you consume foods that's high in sugar and foods that are processed and eating a lot of fast food and things like chips and chocolates as example, all these on the long run initially might not cause an issue, but if you keep continuing in that pattern, it's only a matter of time before the consumption is too much that our body is not able to process and keep up with that need. And that's when the insulin resistance happens. Now, when the insulin resistance starts building over time, over years, it can go on to become very severe. And there are many factors in place that can actually impact the likelihood of you developing this. Obviously, without saying, the main one is the kind of lifestyle you lead from early on in life. But things like genes can really impact how you process as well, and maybe puts you at a faster rate of developing something like that with maybe a less consumption than of these things than what I just described. Some people, they have family history of type 2 diabetes at a very young age, and that can actually impact how they process sugars, and therefore can put them at a higher risk of developing this at a very early stage, rather than someone who doesn't have these genes that puts them in that predisposition. The other thing is, essentially, if you are going under stress and your body is always in a stress response, it's basically secreting cortisol almost in a continuous pattern. And if you're always having that cortisol at a high level, it actually increases the level of sugars in your blood, and that is chemically related to the fact that that kind of stress response, the fight or flight response in early days, was related to, worrying about losing your life because you will be eaten by a tiger or be eaten by a lion. Now, our body is still trying to adapt to the different kinds of stressors that we see every day now, but it still produces the same response, and therefore it would have been good at that time if you are building up sugar that can help you maintain good energy levels to be able to fight anything that comes your way. But now the type of stressors are different, and therefore the cortisol that's building up in your system is just increasing your sugar levels over time. And some people can be in a chronic stress, which means chronic cortisol production, producing more sugars and basically making you build up more fat, specifically around the tummy area, but also around the thighs area. And that's different in males and females as well. Essentially, putting these things together, as well as our microbiome, which is basically the good bacteria that lines your bowels, it's there to help you. But you're not helping it if you're eating things that are processed, if you're eating things that are high in sugar, because that's not what it requires to thrive, to help you essentially. If you're always giving it that type of food, what happens is that it slowly dies off and bad bacteria builds in your lining of the bowels, and that kind of bacteria actually thrives on eating more and more sugar. So you will actually feel like you need more and more sugar because of what's lining your microbiome. And there has been a lot of research recently about this, and a lot of it does show that whatever you eat impacts that, and if that's impacted, then it impacts things like what type of food you eat, And subsequently, with all of this, we are building up the insulin resistance over time. Now, understanding insulin resistance will lead us to, well, how do I prevent it? Or what are the things that I can do to help minimize this? Essentially, what makes your body reach a breaking point? The breaking point is when you're consuming too much, coupled with genes and all of the risk factors that we've just discussed. And it's only a matter of time before your body just stops being able to produce enough insulin to keep you in a good range and keep your body healthy. Now, when you add things like stress, which I described the mechanism of, plus sleep disturbance, where you're not having good enough sleep to recuperate, and because your body goes into a lot of processes overnight to try to fix anything that went wrong during the day in the very basic level chemical or biochemical processes that occur in your body. So when you don't have enough sleep, this is not happening very well. And therefore, that could also impact the cortisol levels that you have and contribute to insulin resistance, essentially. Having said that, the road to actually prevent that or treat that starts very early on by trying to maintain a lifestyle that has higher fiber intake and lower sugar, as well as lower processed food intake, and increasing vegetable and fruit intake within range and within things that have very high fiber. However, the most important thing to add to that, whether it was prevention or treating it, is exercise. Because guess what? Having high muscle build actually helps you fight insulin resistance, because that helps you process the sugars better. So if you have a good amount of muscles in your body, then that will help you process your sugars better. So doing this over time will help you build very healthy muscle mass over time. And that subsequently will help you achieve a better control of your sugar levels and ability to eat a variety of food without worrying too much about having any insulin resistance or high sugar spikes. The other thing that has been populating the headlines is the use of Monjaro and the use of Ozempic. Now, how do these target things like insulin resistance? Long story short, it helps produce even more insulin. But coupled with that, it allows you to not develop that propensity or the need to actually eat more sugars. And therefore, coupled with your cravings for sugar and for food generally becoming a lot less. So what happens when you take these medications is that you're not consuming as much sugar because your cravings are a lot less, and you're producing more insulin. So that causes the insulin resistance cycle to break, and therefore you will be able to lose weight. What happens, unfortunately, with insulin resistance is that weight loss becomes a bit of a problem just because your body is in that state where it needs to build rather than break down. And consuming sugars is not helping with the process. The healthier way, without taking any medication or anything externally, is basically a bit slower but more rewarding on the long run, because you'll be changing your lifestyle into something that has less sugars, more fibers, and more things that are not processed. And at the same time, you're exercising to try to break that cycle, because with better muscle mass, you'll have better processing of sugar. And with all that ongoing, what will happen is that you will break that cycle. It will just take you a bit longer, but on the long run, you'll be able to maintain that weight loss without having to use any other medications. Thank you so much for listening. And I really hope you enjoyed this, and pop your questions in the comment section below. Thank you.